guys, I'm Archana from Edureka and I welcome you all to this session on test cases in software testing. So without any delay, let's go ahead and take a look at the topics which we will be talking about in this session. So we will begin by discussing why documentation is really important in software testing. Then we will start with our today's topic, which is test cases. We will take a look at what test cases are, why do we need them, format of a test case, and how to write a good test case in software testing. And finally, we will end this session by writing a simple test case on a bank website. So I hope agenda was clear to you guys. Let's get started then. The primary objective of any software project is to get a high quality product while reducing the cost and the time required for completing the project. And to do that, companies most of the time need to test their software before it actually goes out the door. Software testing over time has evolved as an important domain in computer science. Software testing basically is the process of executing the software or in any kind of application to find out if there are any bugs or errors in it. Before software actually goes public, programmers spend hours trying to iron out every little bug there is in an application or software. They check for any mistakes or problem in the design and the functionality of the software. Until then, the product won't be available for commercial use in the market. Finding out bugs can be a lot of fun, and it's not only for testers, but it's also for everyone who wants their application to be bug-free. Today's tester has a very high demand in IT market. Well, according to recent reports, companies contribute about 25% budget to software testing. And by 2025, it might be around 33%. So you get the point, right? The demand for testers is really high. Well, that's out of way. Now let me ask you guys a question. Is documentation really necessary in software testing? What do you think? Yes, it is. Documentation plays a very important role in software testing. Either it can be manual testing or automation testing. Here's an example to convince you people. Well, a company, let's call it ABC, had delivered a project and the project had a known issue. They delivered this project to one of its client, let's say a very angry client, and they found out the issue at client side, which became a very bad situation for the company. And as usual, all the blame was put on quality analyst of the company. The issue was something regarding the compatibility of one website. Well, when this issue was taken to higher authorities, they showed the client a written proof of not receiving any requirement asking to check the compatibility of the website. So the issue was resolved very peacefully. In a way, documented requirements save the company from getting sued. And that's how documentation comes handy. Now, if you were asked to write a test case, would you know what to do or what that is? What would a test script or a test scenario be? The first step is learning what these terms are. Each of these terms implies a different level of detail in documentation and is used for different purpose. Once a tester knows what each of these terms mean, they can figure out how to use them to describe the testing that they're doing on a daily basis. So let's get started then. The story actually begins with most detailed way to document testing, which is the test script. It is a line-by-line description of all the actions and the data needed to perform a test. A script typically has steps that try to fully describe how to use the program, like which button to press or in which order to carry out a particular action in the program as such. Sometimes they also include specific results that are expected for each step. For example, an example step might be click the X button, and for that step, example result would be the window closes. So that's what test script is. It's a detailed way of documenting what you're actually doing during or after or before the testing. The second most detailed way of documenting testing work is to use test cases. Test cases describe a specific idea that is to be tested without the detailed steps which are actually specified in test scripts. For example, a test case might say, test that discount codes can be applied on top of a sale price. This doesn't mention how to apply the code or whether there are multiple ways to apply the code. Will the tester use a link to apply a discount or enter a code or have a customer service app that apply the discount? It doesn't matter. Test cases give flexibility to the tester to decide exactly how they want to complete the test. And apart from test script and test cases, we have least detailed type of documentation, which is test scenario. A test scenario is a description of an objective a user might face when using the program. An example might be test that user can successfully log out by closing the program. Just based on that light description, tester might choose to close the program through the menu option, kill it through the task manager, turn the computer off, or see what happens when the program runs out of memory and crashes. Since test scenarios offer little information on how to complete the testing, they offer the maximum amount of flexibility to the tester who is responsible for testing. So guys, well, these are three ways of documenting what you're actually doing before or after testing. Apart from these, there are other types of documentation, but as for today's session, we are going to concentrate on test cases. The primary goal of a test case is to ensure whether different features within an application are working as expected under the given conditions or not. It helps validate if software is free of defects and if it is working as per the expectations of end users. The activity of writing test cases help you to think through the details and ensures you're approaching the test from as many angles as you possibly can. So basically, test cases ensure good test coverage, which is really a key functionality when it comes to testing. It improves the quality of the software and decreases the maintenance and software support costs. It allows the testers to think through different ways of validating features. As a tester, you'll have the option to think from different angles. And in test cases, you can write test cases for negative test data as well, which is often overlooked most of the time. And these test cases are reusable for future. Anyone can reference them and execute the test. And they also help you to verify that the software meets the end user requirements and the end user or a customer is really happy about your product or an application. So guys, these are few reasons why test cases are extremely useful in software testing. Test cases are powerful artifacts that are beneficial to future teammates as well as a good source of truth for how a system and particular feature should work. However, before we deep dive into the lessons for writing top-notch test cases, let us have a basic idea on the terminologies associated with them. So the primary ingredients of a test case are an ID, description, bunch of inputs, few actionable steps, as well as expected and actual results. Let's learn what each of these terms mean. First, you have test case name. The first step for writing an effective test case is giving it a name or a title that is self-explanatory. As a best practice, it's good to name the test case along the same lines as the modules that you're actually testing. For example, suppose you're testing a login page, title can be something like login page. If the tool you're using doesn't already do this, it might make sense to include a unique identifier instead of a long title. So what I'm saying is that instead of using a test case name, you can actually use an ID for the test case as well. And make sure the ID is unique for each test case. But if you are using a title or a name, it should be self-explanatory. So one look at the title name, any person who is looking at it should get to know what you're actually testing on. So moving on to next parameter, it is test case description. The description should tell the tester what they're going to test. Sometimes this session might also include other information such as test environment, test data, preconditions, assumptions, and all that. A description should be easy to read and immediately communicate the high-level goal of the test. It should not be lengthy, right? So if it's actually very lengthy, nobody's going to look at it. It should be in such a way that it should be very small and one look at it, the reader will know what it is actually about. So crisp, that's the word I'm looking for. So the next parameter is preconditions. You should include any assumptions that apply to the test or any kind of preconditions that must be met prior to the test being executed. Well, this information can include which page the user should start the test on, dependencies on the test environment, and any special setup requirements that must be done before you actually start the test. This information also helps testers keep the test steps short and concise. For instance, in our logout example, the assumptions and prerequisite can be the user is logged in and already has a valid yahoo.com email address along with the password. And as for the assumption, it could be the user is trying to access yahoo.com on a supported web browser. So anything that you want to actually mention before you actually start testing, you can do it in this preconditions. The next one is actually the test case steps. The test steps should include the necessary data and information on how to execute the test. This is perhaps the most important part of a test case. It is important to keep the steps clear and brief without leaving any essential details. In case the step is difficult to navigate, having relevant artifacts like screenshots or some sort of comments can be very helpful. And next comes test data. Testing for every data permutation and combination is really challenging and literally impossible. Hence, it becomes important to select a data set that gives you sufficient coverage. So select a data set that specifies not just the positive scenarios but negative as well. So this way you cover all round possibilities. Then you have expected result. The expected result tells the tester what they should experience as a result of test steps. It helps the tester determine if the test case passed or failed. Then comes the actual result. Actual result column in the test case specifies how the application actually behaved while test cases were being executed. If the actual and expected results are the same, it means that your test case was successful. And to show if your test case was successful or not, you can actually add one more parameter like status of the test case. Well, I haven't shown it here, but you can go ahead and add it. And finally, you have something called comments. Any useful information such as screenshots that tester can provide to developers or some sort of instructions can be included in this comment part. So guys, this is the typical format that testers follow when they write a test case. Along with these elements, testers can include additional parameters like test case priority, type of test case like is it a positive test case or a negative test case, or if you have a lot of bugs, you can actually assign an ID separate for each bug. So we have another parameter like bug ID and all. So this is not a fixed format, it depends on the tester, but basically every test case usually includes these parameters plus additional some. So now that you know about the basic format or how to represent a test case, let's go ahead and look at different techniques that you can use to write the test cases. A good test case design technique is really crucial to improving the quality of the software testing process. It helps to improve the overall quality and the effectiveness of the released software or an application. The test case design techniques are broadly classified into three major categories, which are specification based or black box test, then you have structure based, and finally you have something called experience based. So let's look at each of them in more detail. Specification based or black box test case design techniques are usually used to design test cases in a systematic manner. They use external description of the software such as technical specifications, design details, client's requirement, and more to derive the test cases. With the assistance of these test case design techniques, testers are able to develop test cases that save time and allow full test coverage. And under specification based or black box techniques, you have 5 more types. Let's look at them later. Moving on to our next major category, it's structure based or white box techniques. The structure based designs test cases based on internal structure of the software program and code. Here, developers go into minute details of the developed code and test them one by one. It's further divided into 5 categories again. And finally, the last major category is experience-based techniques. These techniques are highly dependent on testers' experience to understand the most important areas of software. They are usually based on the skills, knowledge, and the expertise of people involved in the testing phase. So these are the 3 major categories. Moving further, let's look at different techniques which come under the categories that we just discussed. First, under specification based or black box test, we have 5 types, like I said earlier. The first one is something called boundary value analysis, or abbreviation is BVA. This technique catches any input errors that might interrupt with the proper functionality of the program. Then you have equivalence partitioning, or EP. In this technique, the test input data is partitioned into number of classes having an equivalent number of data. So the data is distributed equally. The test cases are then designed for each class or partition that are made. This actually helps you to reduce the number of test cases. And then you have decision table testing. Here, test cases are designed on the basis of decision tables that are formulated using different combination of inputs. And then you have state transition diagram. As the name actually indicates, testers use state transition diagram to write and filter out the test cases. Finally, you have something called use case testing. In this technique, the test cases are designed to execute different business scenarios and end user functionalities. Moving on to our next major type, white box or specification based. Here again, we have 5 types. The first one is statement coverage. This technique involves execution of all the executable statements in the source code at least once. Then there is decision coverage. Well, this is also known as branch coverage. It is a testing method in which each one of the possible branches from each decision point is executed at least once to ensure all reachable code is executed. Then you have condition coverage. Condition testing is also known as predictive coverage testing. Each Boolean expression is predicted as true or false here. All the testing outcomes are at least tested once. This type of testing involves 100% coverage of the code. And then you have multiple condition testing. The purpose of multiple condition testing is basically to test the different combination of conditions to get 100% coverage, which I mentioned in the previous step, which is condition coverage. And finally, we have something called path coverage. In this technique, the source code of a program is used to find every executable path. This helps to find out all the faults within a particular code. Moving on to our next major type, it's experience based. We have something called error guessing. In this technique, the testers anticipate the errors based on their experience, availability of data, and their skill and knowledge of product failure. So that's why it's called error guessing. And then we have something called exploratory testing. This technique is used to test the application without any formal documentation. In this, the test design and the test execution are performed concurrently. So guys, these are some major popular techniques that you can use to write a test case. So the successful application of any of these test case design techniques will render test cases that ensure the success of software testing. So guys, test cases are very important for any project because they are the first step in any testing cycle. And if anything actually goes wrong at this step, it might impact as you move forward in your software testing lifecycle. Knowing how to write good test cases is extremely important. It doesn't take too much of your effort and time to write effective test scripts as long as you follow certain guidelines. Let's take a look at few guidelines or best practices that you need to follow while writing test cases. First of all, you need to consider test cases based on risk and priority. Prioritize which test cases to write based on the project timeline and the risk factors of your application. For example, a high-risk feature that is scheduled for delivery in 6 weeks might be of higher priority than a feature or a low-risk feature which is due to be released in next week. Well, there's no given formula on how to decide on the priority here. You will get to know with experience. Moving on, make sure you don't forget about the 80-20 rule. The 20% of your test should cover 80% of your application. Even writing a short scenario can uncover a significant part of your bugs. So this is basically the principle which is used behind sanity and smoke test actually. Then start with the good enough test cases. What I mean by that is, writing tests is never done in one swoop. Many times it's better to write test cases that are good enough at the present, but be sure to revise them in future if needed. And the most important thing is, your test cases should be crisp. Test suites should be defined so that they take between 45 and 90 minutes to run while still covering a significant area of system in one swoop. So when choosing what test to write, focus on how they can be outsourced. Make sure your test cases can be completed by others if necessary. Next, classify test cases based on business scenario and functionality. This will allow you to look at the system from different angles. The logic here is that you need to know what test to write and when to actually write it. Differentiating will also help organize your test in the test library so you and your team can actually choose what test cases need to be run based on the need of your testing. Another important thing, put yourself in the shoes of customer. It is often a common scenario like we discussed one in the beginning of the session that an angry customer would knock up at customer support explaining that software is not delivering an intended feature up according to his expectation. So while writing test scenarios, keep end users requirement in the back of your mind because ultimately the product or the software designed is actually for the customer, right? So that's important. Put yourself in the shoes of customer. Think like a customer. And actively use a test case management tool. Test case management tools are deemed necessary for managing a stable release cycle. They help to develop a level of transparency where everyone knows about who is working on what. They can also be used for tracking deadlines related to a bug fix and a lot more. In order to write effective test cases, it is important that you learn the practical use of your respective test case management tool. Guys, there are a lot of test case management tools in the market. You can choose the one according to your requirements and actually be sure of what you're actually using the tool for. And finally, monitor all the test cases. So when working as a remote software tester, or if there are too many software testers who are working on a similar project, then it's common for two software testers to bump on two similar test cases. Therefore, monitor all the test cases which are written by you and make sure to note them if they are unique or if they are common. Also remember to remove the irrelevant and the duplicate test cases. Well, I can keep going on, but there are way too many guidelines than I can actually cover in this session. The ones that we learned just now should be good enough for you guys to actually get started in writing test cases. So do check out for more as you progress. Now let's see a few common problems that you come across in test case writing process. The first thing is composite step. So what is a composite step? Here's an example. Let's say you're giving directions from point A to point B. When you say something like go to XYZ place and then to ABC, it doesn't make much sense, right? That's a composite step. Instead of that, you can say turn left from here and go 1 mile and then turn right on the road number 11 to arrive at place XYZ. That makes more sense. Here's an actual testing example. So as you can see, that's the wrong way of writing your test case. I have 5 steps here. The first step is to log into a website, then actually to go to real-time test session, select the configurations, and the step 4 is hit start button to run the test and perform testing of your website on respective configuration. And step 5 is to terminate the test session. Now, which do you think of these steps is a composite step? If your answer is 4, you're absolutely right. You'll get to know why. Let me show you the right way of writing it. Instead of just saying hit start button to run the test and perform testing of your website based on the respective configuration, you can just elaborate it. For example, let's say, let's start from the step 4, hit start button to run the test, scroll from the top to bottom of the web page, check all the icons and paddings are supported or not, check resolution display, and then terminate the session. Well, in the wrong way of writing, we've actually skipped all these important steps. So what I'm trying to say here is that test cases should always be self-explanatory. It is important to write the test cases as granular as possible. So guys, be granular while writing down the steps for execution. So break them down instead of making it complex and representing them in the single sentence. Another frequent mistake that you might make is including multiple conditions in one test case. Once again, let's learn from example. On the screen, you can actually see a set of steps which are included in a single test for a login function. Let's check them out. So the first step is to enter valid details and click submit. Leave username field empty and click submit. Leave password field empty and click submit. Choose an already logged in username or password and click submit. So basically, I have included all the 4 steps in one step. Now you might be thinking, what's wrong with that? It's saving a lot of documentation, and what I can do in 4 steps is actually I'm doing in 1 step. Isn't that great? Well, not quite. Here are the reasons as to why. So what if one of the condition fails? We have to mark the entire test as failed, right? If we mark the entire case failed, it means all the 4 conditions are not working, which really isn't the case. It's because just the first case is not working, but you're marking failed for all the 4 conditions. That doesn't make sense. Tests need to have a flow here, which you cannot actually see. So the solution is to write modular test. So guys, these are the common mistake that you might make when you're actually started writing test cases. So please do keep this in mind when writing test cases so that you can avoid them. So guys, that's all with the theory part. Let's go ahead and write a test case now. But before that, here are the simple steps to get you started with. First thing is to prepare to write a test case. First of all, consider if your test case already exists. Before writing a new test case for your module, find out if there are any already existing test cases that test the same component. If you do find anything as such, consider updating the test case rather than writing a new one. Next, know the characteristics of a good test case. Being aware of what constitutes a good test case will help you write a better and a strong test case. Well, you might ask what characteristics. Here are a few. First of all, you have something called accuracy. The test clearly articulates the purpose. Then you have something called tracing. The test is capable of being traced to requirements. Then you have repetition. Test can be used to test as many times as necessary. Reusability. The test can be reused if necessary. And then you have independence. Every test case you write should be able to be performed in any order without depending on any other test case. These are few characteristics that a good test case should have, so make sure your test case falls somewhat under these categories. And the next step is to consider the different scenarios before you actually start writing. Concentrate on what could happen with the product when being used by a customer. Think from the shoes of customer. Think about this carefully and design your test accordingly. And finally, give yourself sufficient writing time. Because scenarios and cases form the base for your future test cases and testing, you need to give yourself enough time to write a quality test as well as time to have procedure thoroughly reviewed. So don't write the test cases in hurry. Like I said, the best guideline when you're actually writing a test case is to write a good enough test case. Start with small and make it perfect as you progress. So these are just prep before you actually start writing a test. And now that you've started writing a test, what you actually need to do is select a tool for the writing a test case. There are a lot of tools out there. Excel spreadsheets are highly recommended for writing basic test cases and for manual testing as well. Apart from that, you have other tools such as TestLink, WebTest, Testopia, and many others. So according to your requirements, choose the tool whichever you feel comfortable with and make sure you know the functionality of the tool. And next step is to write a test case with a chosen tool. Well, we did discuss the template of the test case earlier, right? So include all those parameters and write a well-defined test case. So once you've written a test case, the next step is to write a basic test case statement. For example, you have few parameters like verify, what is being actually tested, using, what tool you're using, the tag name, dialog. Then you have with, what are the conditions under which you're actually testing for. And then to, what is being actually fed as an input to the test, what is being written, and what is the expected result and all that. So once you've finished testing, it's like a final note on what you actually have written your test case or a basic test statement for your test case. And finally, review the written test case. Your job isn't quite over once you've actually written the test case. You still need to review everything that has been written and evaluate that all steps are clear and comprehensible and that the expected results match with those steps. So I hope the steps were clear enough, right? And I guess now you're good to go. You can actually start along with me or you can actually see what I'm doing right now. And after that, you can go ahead and write a test case of your own. So let's go ahead and write a test case for a banking website. So guys, as for this session, in this demo, I will be using Excel sheets to write my test case. You can actually go ahead and use any other kind of test case management tool for your purpose. So before you actually get started with the test case, there are some basic details that you should mention. It's not a compulsory thing, but it's good to have a basic description about what you're actually going to do. So let's say the project name, then module name, as in the module which I'm going to test. The test case is written by, written date, executed or reviewed by, and similarly executed date, and so the project name would be bank website testing. Then you have module name, which can be login because we're checking the login functionality first. It's written by, let's give my name, date, some month, and some year, executed by some XYZ person, and then again some date, some month, and some year. We're good to go. Now let's just mention the parameters, which should be test case title, or it can be ID if you want. Next should be test case description. Then test steps, preconditions if I have any, test data, expected result. So I'm just gonna add these for now. If according to your requirement, you can go ahead and add other things as well. Actual result, and let's add something called status to see if the test case was successful or not. And finally, comments. Here we go. We are checking on login functionality. So I'm giving the name as login functionality, which is verify functionality with valid username and password. Let me align it. Okay. And as for the test steps, which should be navigate to login page, enter username, enter password, click login. Preconditions, nothing for navigation. Here I'm saying it should be valid username, similarly valid password. Now the test data, let's give username as some random data. And as for the password again, so what should be the expected result for navigate to login page? You should be able to see the login dialog box. Credentials can be entered. Or you can say same thing, credentials can be entered. If or not actually you're trying to enter, when you're trying to enter, if the data is actually getting inserted or not. Then here for the click login, you can say user logged in. Since we are using valid username and password, let's just write the actual result for each of these steps. Let's say we have successfully navigated a login page. So let's just write as expected. It means we are able to navigate to the login page. Then credentials can be entered again as expected. What I'm trying to represent here by writing as expected is that it's as expected to my expected result. And user logged in, since we are entering valid details, it's successful login. Or let's say user successfully. Now the status is pass, which is from all my 4 steps. So I'm going to do this pass. I do not have any comments. That's it, guys. We've successfully written a test case. Let's write another one for the invalid details. So again, the name is same. Let me just copy this and paste it. That's better. With invalid username and password. The rest of the steps are same. Invalid username. I've removed the U if you can see here. Then the password is going to be valid. So I'm going to put that here same. As for this, you should be able to see the login page. That should be successful. Credentials can be entered, as in you're able to enter the details, and user logged in. This 3 should be same as expected because you're able to navigate, you're able to enter in the details. But as for here, user login unsuccessful. So that will be pass, which is going to be same for rest of the 3 steps. But this step is a fail. So guys, as for login, these are 2 cases that I've written here. We can go ahead and write for multiple possibilities like invalid username, invalid password, valid username, invalid password, or if your navigation to the login page is not happening, like that for different combination, you can actually write test cases. Suppose let's say you have logged in successfully. Let's write a test case to upload photo in your profile. So the name should be upload photo functionality. Here we go. What should be the description? Upload a photo as logged in user sounds good. When I say logged in user, I meant valid user. Now I want to add another extra field here. Let's say preconditions or pre-steps actually. I need to insert a column. Yep, here we go. And I'm going to make it as pre-step. What is a pre-step? The pre-step here is login with correct data. Login with valid data. That's the action I actually want to perform. That's why I've written in the step. As for the preconditions, I can say login details should be valid. Now, the test steps, I have 3. First one is click the upload, let's say click the upload photo link or photo button. Link is more better. Then upload a photo, as in add the photo. And then you have click on the upload button. So precondition I've already added, that's login details should be valid. I do not have any test data or anything. Let's go for the expected result. What I'm expecting to happen here is upload a photo page should open. That's what I'm expecting to happen. And as for here, when I upload a photo, image should be selected. Image to add should be selected. Image to be uploaded should be selected. Now, the next thing is click on upload button. Photo should be successfully uploaded. So photo uploaded correctly. Properly or correctly, anything. Now, what are the actual results I'm expecting? It's the test case here is upload photo as a logged in user, as in successful user. So as expected, if the navigation works proper, if I click on that photo upload link, if it goes proper, then as expected, similarly. And here's the same as well. So this will be pass because my test is passed successfully, then pass and pass. Well, this was for a logged in user. If you do the same for the invalid user credentials, you wouldn't have anything in the pre-step here. So upload photo as a invalid user. For all these actions, upload a photo page if it navigates properly, that should be a pass. Upload a photo if you actually have any photo that you're uploading, that would be a pass. But when you click on the upload button, it does work properly. But before actually this happens, you are logging in or you're using this as a invalid user. So here your test tape actually fails here itself, before itself, because you're not a valid user. So this way you can actually write the test cases according to your requirements. So guys, based on the things that we have learned today, go ahead and write a sample test case according to your requirement. There are a lot of sample templates on Google that you can search for and verify to actually master writing test cases. So guys, we have reached the end of the session. I hope you've understood what we have learned today and I hope you've liked the session. If you did like it, please do click on the like button. And if you have any doubts or any kind of comments, please include them in the comment section below. Thank you and meet you in the next session.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it and you can comment any of your doubts and queries and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!